This week we're beginning a new Torah portion called Tzav Bnei Yisrael. And we've got here, it's also talking about the sacrifices, and it's giving details about some of the sacrifices we've already learned about. Most notably, what's called, the Olah. Olah is an offering which was brought on the altar every day. Well, it was brought also, one of the sacrifices was an altar. One of the sacrifices that was burned totally on the altar was called the Olah. The Olah is burned totally. As we talked about last week, some sacrifices are eaten, parts of it are eaten by the Kohen, the priest who brings it out. And all the sacrifices, something is burned on the altar. But there's some of them that also the Kohen gets part of it. And there's some of them that also, in addition to the altar eating it, the owners also eat part of it. That's going to be the Shlomim. We'll talk about that also today. And then there's also other details about the sacrifices. I'd like to just go briefly over the sacrifices that appear in this week's Torah portion. There's 18 of them. 18 of them. But first of all, let's just look at the text, and then we'll go to the details of the sacrifices. And there's a couple other commandments also over here. All right, so begin. Let's go. 18 commandments in this week's Torah portion. Here we go. Vayedaber Hashem el Moshe lemor. God spoke to Moshe to say over to the Jewish people. Tzavet Aaron, command Aaron, that Banov and his children. How should you command them? Lemor, say to them like this. Et korbani, Zot Torah Ta'olah. These are some of the laws of the Olah. We talked about this before, last week, but here's more. Heyo Olah ala Mokta, this is brought on the fire, on the altar, the whole night, Araboker, until the morning. The Eish HaMizbeach, and the fire of the altar, sorry, I'm tired. The fire of the altar, Tukad Bo, will burn on it. Of course, it's going to burn. Does it have to tell us that it's going to burn on the altar? You'll see. So what do? You have to leave this olah. You don't eat any part of it. So the whole thing goes up on the fire, and it burns the whole entire night. And the morning, Balavash Kohen Midobad, in the morning, the Kohen will put on garments, Miklasei Bad, garments of bad. In this case, means wool. Means why is it called mido? Because it's his measure. Balavash al basar, he puts it on his flesh. Mitzvot HaDeshen asher tochal. It actually could be linen in this case. Bad in Yom Kippur is talking about it's linen. And else, but there's sometimes also where bad means wool. Okay. He has to take in the morning. He has to take all the ashes off of the big altar. Is if Mitzvot HaDeshen, he removes the ashes which have been eaten by the fire the whole night. He takes them from the altar, and he puts it next to the altar. Right, one more. Then he takes off these garments, he puts on other garments, and he takes this deshen outside of the camp to a pure place. We'll see what this means. And the fire should be on the altar. Fire should burn on the altar. It should not go out. And the Kohen puts on it wood every morning, and he puts the olah, and that he's going to make this next day, and he burns the on the olah, and he also puts the fats. Those are the portions of the shlomim. The shlomim are the sacrifices that also the owners eat part of. But there, like I said, every sacrifice you always burn something on the altar. So this is worded. A constant fire should burn on the altar. It should not go off. Okay, what's this talking about? Here's a little picture of the altar. Here we got. Huh? Oh, see, there was 3. Some people say there's 4. There's 3 arrangements of wood on the altar. 3 arrangements of wood that are on the altar. And this is what we're talking about. And we're going to see in one moment which ones are which. In any case, he takes the ashes off of here and he puts it next to the altar right over here, like 1/3 of the way. This is like 32 amas. The thing that's 32 amas long. So on the ground, it's like 30. So you take one because it's slanted. So you put it over here. That's where it goes. When you come into the Holy Temple, that's what you see. You see it from this side. The ramp is to your left. That's a little bit of a view, pretty accurate, of what this is the big altar. This is the big altar which is outside of the Holy and the Holy of Holies. Outside of the Holy and Holies. I think they have over here a picture. Yes. Here, see, they have all these very inaccurate pictures. Here's one. Here in the temple, it looked like this. There was the Holy and the Holy of Holies. See, you can see there was what's called the Ulam, and then there was the Holy and the Holy of Holies. Right? This and corresponding in the tabernacle in the desert, there wasn't this entrance way here, this big entrance. There was just the Holy, which is called the tent of meeting, and the Holy of Holies. Sometimes this is called the Devir. And out here is the altar. This is the altar we're talking about. See, here's the altar. You could see it in the Holy Temple. The altar was out here. Here we have another picture of how it looks. Now this is best. See, like this. This is where everybody else was. And this is where good. Let's go back a little bit. Command Aaron and his sons. This is the Olah. This is the Olah which was burnt on the Mizbeach the whole entire night until the morning, and the fire of the altar will burn on it. Let's just see what this means, and then we'll look at the list of the 18 commandments that are in this Torah portion. A lot of these commandments are not relevant except for the time of the Holy Temple, right? Only the time of the Holy Temple, but we learn them for 2 reasons, actually more than 2 reasons. Number one is that there'll be a 3rd temple. When the 3rd temple comes, then these will all be reinstated, so we'll know what it is, number one. Number two, it's a commandment to learn the Torah. It's a commandment to learn the Torah, even laws that never were and never will be. Right? There are some strange laws over there, like this is the wayward son, Ben Sora Mamora. It says it never was such a thing, and there can't be such a thing. It's almost impossible to have all these criterion in order to have this wayward son. He's taken and killed because he eats a certain amount of bread and a certain amount of meat and a certain amount of wine. It has to be a certain state and has to steal it from his friend. Anyway, so that's number. So what God? This is the will and the wisdom of God. Right? Number 3 is that these things actually do exist inside of us. Inside of us. So when we learn about them, we can learn. That's what Chassidut brings out, right? Let's look at Rashi briefly. Tzav et Aaron, ein tzav el lashon ziruz. Tzav means command, means to speed everyone up, to encouragement. Now and for all generations. That's what we're saying before. There'll be a 3rd temple. Omer Reb Shimon, Rabbi Shimon. I mean, all the commandments you have to encourage people to do. Right? We see that there's a lot of Jews who don't do any of the commandments whatsoever. So there's a good reason. But here's one because there's a loss of money. So there's several different opinions what it means, this loss of money. But the most obvious one is that this offering, the Olah, nobody gets any benefit from it. The Kohanim have to work hard, and it takes up the altar the whole entire night, and nobody eats it. So they don't really make any sort of monetary profit from it. And even though, of course, they're doing God's will and etc., but still the fact of the matter is that they personally don't get anything from the offering. So therefore it has to be, they might have the attitude, they'll do it just like everything else, but they have to have an attitude that's as excited about it as if they would be eating it as well. Zos Torah's Ola, this is the Ola. This comes to teach us all the hector chalavim. This comes to tell us about that there has to be burnt the fats and the limbs, and that they burn the whole entire night. Because usually after the what's called the last offering of the day, it's called the Tamid Bein Arbayim. You can't sacrifice anything. You can't do anything on the altar the whole entire night. But here it's telling that it is good the whole night. But it's telling you also which sacrifices are, if you discover that they're not kosher, there was something wrong with it. It was improperly slaughtered, or maybe it had a blemish and it wasn't noticed. And then someone said, "Hey, that animal is a blemish. What are you taking that up?" Which ones, if they go up on the altar, you don't take them down, even though that you can't. They don't count for their owners because they weren't a proper sacrifice. This is going to tell you that all of the olot have, that even if it's puzzle, even if it's no good, that if it goes up on the altar, never comes down. Anything that goes up on the altar, even if it goes up by accident, it's considered to be kodesh and it has to be burnt. You can't do anything mundane with it, not even to throw it away. This is the ola. This is the ola. This comes to exclude a rova or a nirba, an animal that either someone had a sexual relations with this animal, or the animal had sexual relations with someone, with a woman, whatever. That animal cannot be brought up on the altar. Cannot be. Some of the things. Shalom aya pasulin kodesh shenifsulu kodem shabo la'azara. That anything that was made impure before it came to the azara, and that this also cannot be brought up onto the altar. Anything similar to the rova and nirba cannot be brought to the altar. Let's just do the balatorim. And it was coming to tell you that there are certain sacrifices that are not kosher for the altar. Can't be brought up and sacrificed. Tzavet Aaron, what does it say before? That the previous Torah portion that we learned yesterday was talking about a purposeful sins. If a person did this, there are very few of the sacrifices go for purposeful sins. But there is one, it's called the Mi'ila, Korban Mi'ila. If a person purposely misused things of the Holy Temple, then he has to bring what's called the Korban Mi'ila. So that's what he says if he misused. And even if he misused things from the Holy Temple by accident, he did it by accident, it's coming to tell you here that if a Kohen is not, enthusiastic and does things quickly, then it's considered to be like an unintentional sin. And the Torah in some cases treats an unintentional sin as though it's a purposeful sin. In other words, he should have watched himself and been more careful and more enthusiastic about what he did, but because he let himself go, so therefore, even though he might have made a mistake, but still it's treated as though in heaven, it's treated as though he did it purposely, because he should have taken his work more seriously. Now, this is not an easy thing to do, because you have to take your work seriously, the Kohen, every single second that he's working. You can't take like a minute of a break. Here he says, Tzav es Aaron, command Aaron and his sons. I'm sorry. Vayedaber Hashem Moshe. God spoke to Moshe, command Aaron, tell Aaron. Rashi, the Baal HaTurim, says, letters, Vayedaber Hashem el Moshe Lemor Tzav et. And let's look at the last letters here. Tov, Vav, Reishe, that's Torah. That's the letters of the Torah. The Baal of Torah says, these are the last letters, Moshe, Lemor, Tzav et. These are the last letters, Torah. Torah, Moshe is commanding them that they should, the Kohanim, have to work hard in learning Torah. This is the Ola. It says anyone, it says Zos Torah to Ola, Hiya Ola. It says this is the Torah, this is the law of the Ola. It is the Ola. I mean, obviously it is the Ola. What do you have to say twice? It says the Baal HaTurim, this comes to tell you that anyone who learns the laws in the Torah of the Ola, of the sacrifice, it's as though he sacrificed an Ola. So that's another reason to learn these laws, is because they are the will of God. And not only that, if you do the maximum you can, which nowadays the maximum is just learning the laws, because we don't have the temple, but it says if you learn the laws of the sacrifices, it says treated you as though you learned as though you did the sacrifices. That's why there's a thing before we pray. There's several pages of details of the sacrifices, what were in the temple, because it says that prayer is now in the place of the sacrifices, but nevertheless, by learning about them, this also is another way of simulating the sacrifices. Another reason is the sacrifices are called Esha, they're called God's fire, and the Torah is also called fire. Like it says, are not my words like fire? And it says from God's right hand came a fiery law. And also these are the letters of Talmud. Talmud. It says, Miyamino Eish Dat Lamo. Dat Lamo. These are the words of Talmud. Talmud. See, Talmud. Talmud means to learn. It also means the Talmud, the Gemara. The sacrifices are also called bread. Korban Lachem. The Torah is also called bread. Like it says, come and partake of my bread. So this is talking about the Kohanim are commanded to make a special effort to learn the Torah, and this also applies to everyone. Anyone who learns the laws of the sacrifices, as though he's actually making the sacrifices. Okay, let's go and learn the laws, but I just like to take 1 second. All right, now let us go to see some of the commandments of this week's Torah portion. Perhaps we can even look at all of them. Here we go. Let's see. Let's have a look. Here we go. Here. Oh, there we go. Good. Oh, no, did this right? 1 minute. 1 minute. Yeah, that's right. Good. All right, let's go over some of the commandments. Here we have this week. This is a book called Mitzvot HaShem. Remember, we learned this last week also, all the commandments that are here. Let's go a little bit slower, and maybe we'll to separate each commandment to see how important they are. There are 9 positive commandments, in other words, things that we must do, and 9 prohibitions. Let's see what they are. positive commandment, to take the ashes off of the outer altar every morning. Like it says, Vehirim et HaDeshen. The Kohen, he immerses himself in the mikveh. He puts on garments of the Kohen, the most inexpensive ones. He washes his hands and his feet from the laver. Remember we talked about that last week? He takes a shovel of special shovel, which is of silver. He goes to the top of the altar and he moves right here, top of the altar, here. Oh, goes to the top of the altar. He moves the ashes around here and here. You have another picture of the altar. This is this is good. Here. Oh, here we go. Goes up to the altar, moves the ashes around. This is early in the morning. It's all burned down. All the wood is already burned. And he stokes up the coals, the flaming coals, and then he goes down and he arranges all of these coals with all of the ashes and everything on the ground, which is about 3 tfachim from the 3 handbreadths from the altar. So where does he put it? He puts it, like we pointed out last time, over, not here, over here. About 3 tfachim away, 1/10 of the way up, puts it over there. Every day he does this early in the morning. In the holidays, he does it on the last third of the night. And Yom Kippur, he does it from the middle of the night. This is done in the Beis Hamikdash only by the males of the Kohanim. Positive commandment. Number 2, that there should be a fire going on the altar constantly, like it says, Eish Tamid Tukar al Mizbeach. Even though that, in fact, especially in the first temple, fire came down from heaven and it devoured the sacrifices, nevertheless, it is a commandment to bring from people, hedyot. It's the fire, the logs are arranged every morning, the big arrangement, like it says, Boyer Olam Kohen Eitziv Baboker Baboker, and it's also another Kohen should put on 2 pieces of wood, Shtei Gizrei Eitzim, in the Tamid Shachar. In addition to this, like it says, Orach Aleh Kohen Eitzim Baboker Baboker. 2. Here, see? Where? We had a good, nice picture over here. There was a nice picture. We had a nice picture over here. I hope we can find it. Can we find it? If we do, it'll be a big miracle. Anyway, these are the 2. Comes up here. According to him, he says it puts it over here. You'll see there's a little bit, everybody gets it a little bit differently. Yeah, there was a nice clear picture before. Okay. Maybe I'm missing it. Am I missing the picture? Could be. Let's see. All right. Anyway, here's a sort of picture. Oh, here's the big one, and there's one over here and one over there. That's what the 2 Kohanim would bring. And then they would add on 2 pieces of wood on the Batamid in the evening. So there were 3 groups of wood on the altar every day. One was the big one that was in the east. The east is the side when you come in, right? Another one was, the second one was that they took wood, they took fire from it, coals, in order to burn the incense in the inner golden altar. It was an golden altar, which was like between the candelabra, which is on the left, and the face bread, which is on the right. and between that was a golden altar set a little bit forward. So from one of these arrangements of wood, they would burn the sacrifices. Another one, they would take a piece of coal in order to burn the incense on. And the third one was that there should just be fire anytime they happen to need it. If it would go out, there would be fire. That's the three pictures we see over here. 1, 2, 3. And here they would put the offerings would burn here. They would burn up over there on that was called the tapuach. Next commandment. How many have we done so far? 2, 3. A negative commandment. We had a positive commandment. You have to burn fire constantly. A negative commandment: do not extinguish this fire. Lo tichbeh. If the Kohen, only the Kohen went up there. If the Kohen extinguished one coal, even if he took it off from the altar and he put it out, it's forbidden to. It's considered to be a sin. That's from that main group of that main fire that we saw, the big one. Next one, the Kohanim, the male Kohanim, they have to eat from what's left over from the bread offerings, like it says, "Anoteret mimena yochlo Aaron ubanov." We learned about the bread offerings. Do you remember last week? There are bread offerings that are cooked into loaves, some are cooked into like thin wafers. Some of them are boiled in a deep frying pan. Some of them in a regular frying pan. Anyway, the Kohanim, they have to eat the remainder of the offerings. All that was offered up was, there's 1 or 2 exceptions, but the Kohanim have to, they bring up only like 1 handful is actually burned, and then the rest is eaten by the Kohanim. Interestingly enough, the sacrifices, the bread offering of the Kohanim themselves is burned up totally. The Kohanim don't eat it. Negative commandment. Do not, you're not allowed to make or to allow the remainders of the sacrifices, the bread sacrifices, become chametz. You're not allowed to make it into chametz. You're not allowed to allow it to become chametz. In other words, to raise up. Forbidden. Like we said before, there's only 2 offerings that are, from all the offerings of bread offerings that there are in the Holy Temple, there's only 2 of them which come from chametz. That's the 2 breads which are in Shavuot, and 10 of the 40 Thanksgiving offerings, which we'll talk about. That's this week's Torah portion. Talks about the Thanksgiving offering. It didn't talk about last week. Positive commandment that the high priest should make every day a 1/10 of a ephah of flour. It's half of it in the morning, half of it in the evening. Right? This was not eaten. It was burned up totally. Had to bring up in the morning. Here's the details, but let's just. It said he would put oil on it, and he would make it into 13 loaves of bread, and each one would be cooked a little bit, and then he would sort of fry it in a frying pan, right, in the oil that he had, a little bit of the oil, and then afterwards he would divide each one into 2, and half of it would be offered in the morning and half of it in the evening. And this was not eaten. That's called the Chavite Kohen Gadol. Every morning he has to bring this. Negative commandment. The Kohen, this offering of the Kohen Gadol cannot be eaten. Like it says, Kol minchas Kohen kalil tiyeh lo teochel. It is forbidden to eat. So the Kohanim got a part of every offering, every bread offering, except for this one. They didn't get. Positive. We'll do 2 or 3 more. We'll do positive commandment to do the chatat offering. Okay, chatat offering. Part of it was eaten, part of it was burned, etc. Maybe we'll go over this tomorrow. Chatat. Last week we learned there is such a thing, but now we're learning the details. Negative commandment. There's what's called the inner chatat. There are some offerings that the blood was sprinkled on the inner golden altar, and those offerings cannot be eaten. This is the cow and the sheep of Yom Kippur. The cow, the ox, whatever, there was often for the Kohen, Meshuach, the true Kohen that was anointed with oil. This is only in the first temple. Right before the end of the first temple, they stopped anointing. The same king, Yeshayahu, a melech, he was near the end of the first temple, at 50 years, whatever, before the end of the first temple. And he hid the tablets, and he also hid together with it the anointing oil. So then after that, they were just called Meruba Begadim, the Kohanim, just that they had all the garments, but they didn't have the oil. And so all of these are, the blood was sprinkled on the inner altar, and they could not be eaten. It was forbidden to eat them. Positive commandment, that you should do another type of a commandment, which is called the asham offering. And we learned that there's several types of asham taloy, asham vadai. When you certainly discovered you certainly did a sin by accident, or you have a doubt, maybe you did a sin. A positive commandment to do shlomim. It's called the shlomim offering. Now we're going to learn this in the Torah portion, but I just want to go over the commandment. Here we have also the toda, the Thanksgiving offering, shlomim. So these are offerings which are, part of it is burned on the altar, part of it is eaten by the Kohanim, and part of it is eaten by the owners. So we'll stop over here and let's just learn this one. There's 4 types of shlomim offering. Shlomi tzibur. What is that? The shlomi tzibur. These are the 2 sheep which are offered up on Atzeret. There's shlomim. Then there's 3 different types of individual shlomi yachid. Individuals can bring. So one of them is a shlomi tzibur. Obviously, everybody doesn't get a part of that, but the representatives do. But then there's individuals bring. One is called a shlomim offering without any bread. And this was the offering that everybody would bring up to the holidays. Every male had to go up 3 times a year to the Holy Temple, and they would have to bring a simcha offering and a chagiga. They'd bring up 2 offerings to the Holy Temple, and of course they would be eaten. They would be part of the meal, festive meal. Number 2, there were shlomim which came with bread. And this is when a person made a vow to the Holy Temple. Either he said, I will bring a cow, or he said, I will bring this cow. That's a neder and a nedava. Neder is, he said, on me, and nedava means he said, on this cow is I'll bring. If he says this cow, if the cow dies, then he doesn't have to bring it. He says it's on me, then if the cow dies, he has to bring another one because he obligated himself. And this is the sacrifice of the Todah. This is the Thanksgiving offering. And the Thanksgiving offering had 40 loaves of bread. Arba'im chalot. 10 of them were made of chametz. This is a Todah offering, and it was offered especially for a person who, one of 4 things: he got out of jail, life was in danger, and he was saved. He made a long journey, but he was sick. Same thing. Second, he got better. Miraculous. That's called the Toda offering. And let's do this last 2, 3. You're not allowed to leave over offerings after the appointed time. You're supposed to burn them. That's 2 commandments. Don't leave them over. Commandments can be at the maximum 2.5 days. After that time, you're not allowed to eat it. You're not allowed to leave it over. And you are not allowed to eat it. You must burn it. And finally, loves of pigul, which will end with this. Pigul means that when the Kohen kills the animal, or when he brings the blood to the altar, or when he burns the altar up, when he burns the pieces, as he's thinking about eating the animal in the wrong time. In the wrong time, right? There's a limited time, we said. If the Kohen thinks about eating the sacrifice at the wrong time, here we go. If he thinks about that at the time when he's doing the service, either when he's slaughtering or when he throws the blood, or when he receives the blood, or when he takes he slaughters the animal, or when he's receiving the blood, or when he takes the blood to the altar, or when he throws the blood on the altar, or when he sacrifices the pieces of the altar, he's thinking about doing any of these things, or eating the offering, doing the other things in the wrong time, right? Or to eat a kazayas at the wrong time, that's called pigul. So he sacrifices the animal, and he has the thought, I'm going to pour the blood, when he's doing it, I'm going to pour the blood out after the permissible time. I'm going to throw the blood on the altar, or I'm going to take the blood from the animal, etc. At the wrong time, then that's called pigul, and it's forbidden to eat pigul. He had the wrong, just his thought disqualifies it. And we'll learn more about this, God willing, tomorrow. Have a good day with Mashiach. Now, see you tomorrow at 8:15 in the morning.